What's going on, guys? It's Pete Nova from the Face Off Sports Network. I am back with my Week 8 wide receiver rankings slash tiers. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to pull up the tier sheet here, and we're just going to go through it. My first wide receiver and my wide receiver one this week is going to be none other than Justin Jefferson. I mean, best wide receiver in the NFL. He goes up against the Los Angeles Rams on Thursday night. So should be a fun game. The Rams have held their own 20th when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position, 29.7 points per game. But we're talking about the best wide receiver in prime time. I think Justin Jefferson is going to have a nice game this week, and he is going to be my wide receiver one for this week. My wide receiver two is going to be Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase takes on the Philadelphia Eagles. That defense has gotten better, guys. Right now, the Eagles defense 10th when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position, 35 points, but that's also skewed a little bit. They had a really, really nice game last week. Malik Neighbors and the New York Giants did absolutely nothing against them, but that pass rush just absolutely obliterated them. And so, it definitely bumped them down, which helped them in terms of their overall season output when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position. I still love Jamar Chase. I think he's in for a very nice day. The next wide receiver here is going to be AJ Brown. AJ Brown, he takes on the Cincinnati Bengals, not a very talented secondary. They're middle of the pack, 17th when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position, 31.4 per points per game. And so I expect AJ Brown to have a really nice day. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. We talk about two wide receivers here back to back that are going to be in one of the higher scoring games on the week, in my opinion. So I expect AJ Brown to, continue to do what he does best, which is put up fantasy points. So I think he's due for a big day, and he's my wide receiver three. My wide receiver four is going to be CeeDee Lamb. Look, this Cowboys team comes off of a bye, refreshed, we would hope. CeeDee Lamb takes on, a 49ers team that, they're reeling with injuries right now to the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they've been relatively healthy, but, CeeDee Lamb, this is not a secondary that is absolutely stonewalling the wide receiver position in fantasy. I mean, 23 points allowed, 23rd when it comes to points allowed to the position. They're definitely a tough matchup, but I expect the Cowboys with extended rest, to have a good game. And CeeDee Lamb, for what it's worth, he has been very good in prime time and against the 49ers in these matchups historically. So I expect him to continue with that. My last player in this tier is going to be Drake London. Drake London gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, they're also reeling with their own injuries. They did recently get healthier, but they're still giving up the fifth most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. They're giving up 36.7 points per game. I expect Drake London to have a nice day. It's a good spot for him and Kirk Cousins and this offense after they kind of got whooped up on a little bit to the Seattle Seahawks. They get a much softer matchup when it comes to defensive matchup here. So that's going to do it for my first tier. My second tier, we're going to start it off with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's the wide receiver one last week. For those of you who don't know, wide receiver from a standpoint of a wide receiver one on the week, Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver one last week. But prior to that, this was the lowest we have gotten from the wide receiver one on the week in 10 years. He had, I believe, somewhere around 21, 22 fantasy points. And so, that crazy enough, like, I'm sure he won people weeks. It was a low scoring week in general for fantasy, but he gets the Tennessee Titans. This is a tough matchup. This defense has been stout against the wide receiver position, 27th when it comes to points allowed, 27.1 to the position overall per game. But I do think Amon-Ra is going to get his. He's an elite receiver, and I'm not going to rank him outside of the top 10. You can move him around in this tier, in my opinion, with the next couple of guys coming up. But I expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to have a nice day for fantasy. Welcome back, Cooper Kupp. He's going to be my wide receiver 7 this week. He gets to come back prime time on a short week on Thursday Night Football, but he's had plenty of time to rest. And he gets Minnesota. And if there's one thing that you can do against this Vikings defense, it's throw the football. I mean, they're giving up the most points to the wide receiver position in the NFL, which is crazy because we look at the Vikings and we think, man, this defense is so good. And yet they're giving up the most points to wide receivers. It's very hard to run the football against them, but you can throw the football against this defense. I expect Cooper Kupp to come out with a bang, and this Rams defense to show a little bit of fire, because right now, their season is reeling. They come off a win. They need a win. I expect them to come out swinging, and I think Cooper Kupp is in for a big day on his first night back from injury. My wide receiver 8 is going to be Jaden Reed. This guy is an absolute stud. He gets the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last week the Jaguars played the Pittsburgh Steelers. They did hold their own. They're the Steelers. I mean, not the Steelers. The New England Patriots. Pop Douglas, their number one receiver, was sick. He left the game and didn't come back. And they held their own against that offense, but they're fourth when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position, 40.7. And I expect Jaden Reed, this offense overall to, be able to throw the football, very well against this Jaguars defense. Jaden Reed has been phenomenal for fantasy this year. I don't expect that, to hit a snag this week. He is more than deserving to be in a tier 2 this week against a really strong matchup in a good way. And so Jaden Reed's going to be here in this tier 2. My last wide receiver, similar to Cooper Kupp, but he's actually been healthy. He just hasn't produced, but we're expecting things to change. It's going to be Tyreek Hill. Welcome to the show, Tyreek Hill. This is a guy who people forgot about him. Tua Tagovailoa with the injury. We get it. It just hasn't produced for fantasy, but Tyreek Hill coming back against Arizona. I don't know if this offense is going to be fireworks necessarily, but I do expect Tyreek Hill to get fed. I'm sure he is not happy with the production that he's gotten, and I'm sure he is ready to go. This Cardinals secondary, 6th when it comes to points given up to the wide receiver position, 36.1. So look for Tyreek Hill to be back and better than ever for fantasy. We're going to drop down to our tier 3. And that's going to start with Malik Neighbors. He's in the LSU uniform. I thought it was going to take me a little longer to find him there, but he gets a nice matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is going to be on prime time. We saw him on prime time last time against the Cowboys, and he showed out and did really well. He gets a Steelers secondary who is relatively stingy. I mean, their points are skewed. They're more middle of the pack. Now they're 22nd when it comes to points allowed to the position at 29. But prior to last week, I mean, they held their own against the Jets. And they could give Daniel Jones some issues. But Malik Neighbors, man, I mean, what can you say about a guy in his rookie season performing to the level that he has? I think this offense understands that, he did not get the football last week, and they're not going to win many football games as it is. But if they want to win football games, Malik Neighbors is going to have to get the football. So they're going to make it a point to get the ball in his hands early and often. And I feel really confident about him. He's going to start our tier 3 here at wide receiver 10 on the week. Moving on, our next wide receiver is going to be DJ Moore. DJ Moore takes on the Washington Commanders. Chicago, fresh off of a bye. And, the last time we saw this offense, they spread the ball around. Keenan Allen got his. They were all in London. There was a lot of points scored. Caleb Williams looks like he took the next step. Now, he did get some favorable matchups, but, they play the Washington Commanders who, the Commanders, give them some credit. They've been really good this year. Defensively, though, seventh when it comes to points allowed to the wide receiver position, 35.4. And I think DJ Moore is in a good spot this week, coming off of a bye with extra game planning. And we get the two rookie quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels hopefully is back. Caleb Williams, I expect it to be a decently high scoring game. So give me DJ Moore here at the number 11 spot. My next wide receiver is going to be Stefan Diggs. Stefan, where are you? Come on down, Stefan Diggs. He's somewhere in here. Where are you? There he is. In the Bills uniform, gets me every time. These guys are never in the right uniforms. But Stefan Diggs, wide receiver 12, going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Expect that to be a very good matchup for him. This Colts secondary and defense in general, they've been banged up. But it's a good matchup, middle of the pack, 16th in points allowed to the position, 31.8. So he's going to slot in there at wide receiver 12. Devontae Adams is going to be my wide receiver 13. He's in the Raiders uniform, and they didn't get going last week, this Jets team, but this New England Patriots defense has gotten, pushed around a little bit. I expected them to be better. Christian Gonzalez, and this defense, looked pretty bad against the Jaguars. They're 14th when it comes to points allowed to the position, 33.5. This Jets team knows they have to put their foot on the gas and score points. They didn't bring Devontae Adams in for no reason. He didn't have a great week in his first week with the team. I expect him to have a really, really nice day for fantasy. Moving on to our 14th player on this list, it's going to be George Pickens with the big smile here. George is smiling, that's for sure. He gets Russell Wilson, who had a great day for them from a fantasy perspective, and they won the game, and the offense looks better. George Pickens, over 100 yards last week. Believe he had somewhere around 7 catches. George Pickens is in a much different situation now that Russell Wilson is his quarterback. He's going to be on prime time yet again, 2 weeks in a row on Monday night versus the Giants. And I expect him to have a very nice day against the Giants. Moving to number 15, it's going to be T. Higgins. Let's take a break here 1 second and see, so that I can go ahead and find him. All right, so T. Higgins down here, just found him. T. Higgins is going to be my wide receiver 15, similar to Jamar Chase. I expect this to be a high scoring game. He takes on the Philadelphia Eagles. I like the spot for T. Higgins a lot. So our next wide receiver is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. For the sake of this video, I don't think he is added in here. So for just shits and giggles, since he's on the same team, we're just going to put Gabe Davis there as a placeholder for Brian Thomas Jr. Don't be upset with me. This is just the website, and it's free, and so that's what we're rolling with. Yeah. So Gabe Davis is going to be in place for Brian Thomas Jr. They play the Green Bay Packers, and Brian Thomas Jr. has been, otherworldly for fantasy. He's been extremely consistent. We all thought, I thought myself too, that he had a tough matchup last week against the New England Patriots and Christian Gonzalez, and he went out there and had another monster game. He gets the Packers this week, and Packers matchup wise, it's not it's not extremely hard. It's more middle of the pack, 19th, 30.6 points per game to the wide receiver position. And I expect Brian Thomas to have another solid day and keep his legendary run going. For the tier 3, we're going to start it off with Garrett Wilson here. Garrett Wilson is going to be my wide receiver 17. He takes on the New England Patriots. I expect, Garrett Wilson, it's either going to be him or Devontae Adams. I think one of them is going to have a big game, but I think Garrett Wilson's going to get a decent amount of targets in this one. I feel pretty good about him this week. Moving on to our next player, it's going to be Terry McLaurin. I wanted to put Terry a little higher, but the Chicago secondary has been really good against wide receivers this year. I just can't, I can't put him higher than the guys that we already have listed. So that's where Terry's going to go. Devonta Smith will be my next wide receiver here. He's going to be wide receiver 19 on this list. Again, similar to AJ Brown, his counterpart. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. They didn't get Devonta Smith heavily involved last week. It was just a bad game. They didn't throw the ball a ton. I expect that to change. I think they're going to make it a point to get him the ball this week, and it's a decent matchup for him. Our next wide receiver is going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba in this tier. This is tier 4. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, gets a bump with DK Metcalf being out this week. He gets the Buffalo Bills, and this is not a great matchup. 24th when it comes to points allowed to the position, but I think the volume would be there for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they're going to have to get him the ball. Him and Tyler Lockett should be much more involved this week, so I expect big things from him. Not expecting a wide receiver one output by any means, but he's a low end wide receiver two this week. Maybe high. I mean, maybe a mid wide receiver two at best, in my opinion. But moving on to our last tier here, and then we'll close out the video. It's going to be Jalen Waddle here as my wide receiver 21. Jalen Waddle gets Arizona, just like Tyreek Hill. He gets a bump, and hopefully Jalen Waddle, like Tyreek, can start producing for us for fantasy again, because it's been quite some time, and fantasy managers are frustrated at this point. So he's going to be my wide receiver 21. My wide receiver 22 is going to be Amari Cooper. Scored last week. He gets a tough matchup. Seattle secondary, big corners. They are banged up, so we'll see if they play. Some of their corners were out last week. Cooper in his first game did score a touchdown, which was promising. I expect another week with him and Josh Allen to gel. And yeah, I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I mean, you have Buffalo and Seattle, two top 10 offenses when it comes to points scored. So Cooper should get a bump and be more involved. My wide receiver 23 is going to be Xavier Worthy. They had a deep shot planned up for him, which is what I expected last week coming off the bye. It should have been like a 50, 60, maybe even a 70-yard touchdown from Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes just overthrew him, and Worthy had like an extra 4 or 5 steps on the DB. They play the Las Vegas Raiders, and this is a game where I expect the KC to try to get this offense, especially this passing game, right, and pull out all the stops in the divisional game against a reeling Las Vegas Raiders team. So I think it's going to be a good spot for Xavier Worthy. And then to close out, Darnell Mooney is going to be my wide receiver 24. He does have a picture, so that is good news. And he plays the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Tampa Bay Buccaneers very susceptible. We have Drake London as the wide receiver 5. And so I expect both of these guys to have good days. And it should be a good week overall for pretty much that entire Atlanta offense taking on the Bucs, who are reeling right now. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Any questions, concerns, or, whatever you have, feel free to drop it below in the video and I'll gladly answer it for you. But we will see you guys next time.